Hello, and welcome to the Watershed Moments podcast, where I and other therapists discuss real life, everyday mental health issues to give you real and practical help to live a healthier life for yourself and with others. Now, if you want more content like this, be sure to visit our website at watershedinitiative.com to dig into the library of podcasts, articles, and courses that we've made just for you. And of course, if you need face-to-face help, definitely reach out to our partner affiliate, Lifeology of Richardson and Frisco at 214-556-0996 to get connected with a therapist or life coach. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. All right, guys, welcome back. We are picking up in our Watershed Moments podcast, talking through specific scenarios and cases, really questions that we're hearing from listeners and people that we're interacting with about situations that they're going through in their day-to-day life. And so we're going to pick up another one and just kind of talk it through and see if we can see it from multiple different angles. So Shanda, I'm going to kick it back to you, and maybe you can share with us another scenario that you're hearing out there, questions or experiences that people are going through, and then we can open it up for discussion. What do you got?
Okay, so I hear this a lot, and a lot of my friends are struggling with this right now, where conflict is just a little bit higher because either the husband or maybe the wife is an essential employee. So they're still leaving and going out in the world, and there's this fear and worry around what they may be bringing home, and it's causing some conflict to come up. What would you guys advise to help soothe the conflict and the anxiety around that?
Yeah. So I'm curious if anyone can relate to this one personally. Yeah, this is a common one, right? It's like all of us are going through something like this. I'll share just kind of like on a personal level. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. But yeah, my wife, Dana, she was already doing the stay-at-home homeschool with kids. She helps support the business from home. And so she has been working from home. And so that's never been really an issue. But like for me, doing counseling as a mental health counselor, I still go into the office, and I'll go and it's not just to go and go to the office and do counseling, but I'll have to go out and do the errands so that Dana and the kids don't have to go out to the grocery store. I'll go to the grocery store, right? And so every time I come back home, it's like this process of like, okay, no one touch Dad, nobody kiss him, nobody hug him, and Dad runs into the bathroom, changes clothes, washes down everything, and it's like I should have like a clean room where I could just be isolated and just get washed down and that kind of thing. So this is it has caused some conversations and some tensions at home in terms of like how much am I risking and what am I doing out there to expose myself. So that's just me sharing. I can relate to this one a lot. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts that you might be able to share from your angles in terms of like how that might relate to you as well. Anyone?
Oh yeah, my husband, he's still going to work like 3 to 4 days a week, and he comes home and it's like, oh, you need to take your shoes off and you need to do all this stuff. And even in his job, they actually have them all very isolated with what he does. He's separate from other people. But then you think, oh my gosh, there's a person that was sitting in that chair before you, and what if they have it? And what have you done to clean yourself before you came in here and touched the kids?
How clean are you really?
Seriously, go scrub yourself. My best friend works in a hospital, and her husband is at home with the kids. And so her being at a hospital, and she's at a big hospital in Plano, there's quite a few cases in that very hospital. And she comes home, and they live in an apartment, and she literally will take as much off as she can before she can, without getting a ticket, before she can.
Yeah. Anyone else can relate to this one?
Yeah. I mean, I think this comes down to like still trying to establish that sense of control. We all have different levels of comfort when it comes to germs, and this is just like, even if you were not even concerned about germs and were very like lax when it came to that kind of stuff before, you now have a much heightened sense about that. But the thing that has changed is that everyone else is watching you too, right? You feel like there is a situation where everyone is like collectively trying to do the best that they can, but the standard for everyone is not necessarily the same, and the rules for everyone is not the same, because a lot of people are staying home, a lot of people have to go to work, people have to go to the grocery store, and so there is inherent risk in every single one of those things. And then when you come back to the house, and trying to integrate back into the house makes it very difficult, because you have people that are deemed safe because they've been home, and you're bringing in this, what could possibly be a contagion into the house, and trying to figure out how to manage that. I mean, I know some people that, like Shanda said, they have like designated areas where they change and do things, and trying to work out a plan that everybody's comfortable with, I think, is a really good strategy. And being sensitive, the people that are leaving and having to go out, being able to be sensitive to the people that are having to stay home, because it's such a very different stress dynamic. The people that are staying home are very isolated. They don't have much interaction. The people that are going out still do get to have interaction with people, and they have much more of a normalcy about their lives. But then they're coming back, and the person at home is like, I mean, almost starved for interaction, right? And so that is that whole balance of trying to like be sensitive to both sides of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. To Laura's point, I think it's twofold, right? What I've seen in therapy, it's exactly kind of what this case study touches in on. But first off, the couples that have a plan, right, and basically they can align each other, and they can come to an alignment, right, of like, hey, you know what? I recognize that you have to go out and work, right? And I recognize that I have to stay here at home, and my job, I can do my job from home. But they can come up with a plan of, yes, this is going to be the clean room, right? You're going to take off as much clothing as you can without getting arrested, right? I think they're a little lax on that now, Shanda, to be honest. They're letting some things slide at this point.
Have you tried, are you speaking from experience on this one?
Yeah. We're not going to go there, Lee. No, we're not going to go there just yet. But the aspect of getting to alignment on it and actually having a game plan versus just trying to go through the steps. And I don't want to shift it in this direction, but this is what I've seen a little bit more of, are when both, whether it's your spouse or your partner, your live-in partner, when y'all both are there, when y'all are both in the house together, y'all aren't leaving the house. There isn't one person leaving. Y'all are just there together all day. And so I'm seeing that a lot more as creating a few more frustrations than just the one person going out and one person having to stay in. So I'm seeing a lot, the conflicts have risen, to say the least, when people have to stay in the home together.
Yeah.
I think that's y'all seen any of those.
No, I definitely think, that probably is a relevant question, not just maybe with some couples who are stuck in shelter in place together, but also when you have like a lot of kids, be it teenagers, like Laura is saying, like when you have that much going on in a house, that probably feels like it needs to be its own case study that we need to talk about. Like how do you create space in that kind of environment? So, but yeah, I like what you said, Adrian, about making a plan and getting alignment on that plan about, hey, we are assessing the risk, and the risk is, okay, yes, you could be exposed there, but we weighed the risk, and the consequences of not going out is higher than going out. And so we make that decision together to say, okay, we have to do some hard things. We can try and plan and prepare as much as possible to prevent some of that risk from actually playing through. But I think one of the things I probably see a lot of times in these kind of cases, the one that Shanda brought up here, is that the couple is not aligned on the risk. Like, in order to be able to even make the plan and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have the clean room. This is the process, coming home, going out, all that kind of stuff. A lot of couples that I talk to, it's that I don't necessarily think that my spouse needs to go out. Like, they think that they need to go out. Their job is saying they need to go out, but I don't know why my spouse doesn't set better boundaries to say, no, I'm not going to go out. Like, I think that's probably the more source of conflict for a lot of people, is thinking, like, we are not on the same page in terms of if you should go out, if you want to go out. I don't think you have to nearly as much as you think you do. And so let me add that in there, because I think that's probably the situation for a lot of people as well. let me kick that back out to you guys. You guys have any thoughts or opinions on when you might see between a husband and wife, for example, that they're just not on the same page in terms of what the level of risk is, right? And how do they get alignment on that? What do you guys think?
I like that you put it that way. Oh no, you go, Laura.
Okay, well, I was gonna say one of the things I've noticed, like for example, my daughter works at Starbucks, and so they gave them the option of you can take the month off with pay, or you can work and make additional money, but we're going to take precautions within the store. And I think for, that's a experience that everybody in that company has to then make a decision. Do I continue to work and continue to go into the office, or do I stay home knowing that I'm going to get paid even if I don't go in? And trying to navigate that through a household, like our household has 5 people in it, and that decision affects all 5 of us, right? And so trying to navigate that's hard, because we have some people in the household that have a much higher concern for COVID, and some people in the household that have very low concern. And then we have mom and dad sitting there going, well, if one of us gets sick, all the income stops for this house, or the significant income stops for the house. And so trying to navigate that gets really difficult. And there's really not a good answer, except for having real honest and truthful conversations about it, and trying to have as much grace as possible for one another in those situations, and really trying to listen. But the challenge then also becomes, if your relationship wasn't good before, and then you're trying to add this extra level of stress on there, you can be in a place where it's almost impossible to come to an agreement. And you may have to just say, we're not going to agree on this. We're going to have to just do the best we can with what each person is willing to provide.
Yeah. So I love that y'all both touched in on that. I think what this season has done has highlighted so many different things. And if you were having a rough spat or a rough patch in your relationship to begin with, it has been highlighted and exacerbated during the season. And if there was a misalignment on your work boundaries to begin with, that's usually what it sounds like anyway. That there was a little bit of frustration that had been building for a long time, and possible resentment of some of the boundaries or lack thereof that one spouse had in regards to work. So now with this situation, it's highlighted that, and it's put a really like a huge glare on that situation. And so now there's a lot more animosity, and there's a lot more frustration that comes along with that. And so there's one partner saying, don't you see it, right? Like, don't you see, this is what I've been talking about, your lack of boundaries for this job. And now you have a potential of bringing in a virus into our home. So I've definitely seen that aspect, and trying to Laura's point, how do we get to alignment on that? And maybe there is a possibility that you can't, right? Like that it may not be able to get to alignment on that. But for the sake of the relationship, and for therapists, and I'll kick it back to you guys, for what I've done is to say, what can we agree on, right? Like where can we find some commonalities? Where can we find a place of saying like, okay, we don't have to 100% agree on this situation, that you going outside of the home to work is okay, but we can at least come to an agreement on some things, right? So when you do get back into the home, these are going to be the precautions, right? So when you do get back into the home, or when you are leaving the home, this is how we're going to address it, and this is how we're going to go about it. But love to kick it back to you guys of kind of, how do you get to that place of, we're not going to agree on this. I don't even believe that you should be going out the house to have this job to begin with right now. And now we're highlighting it even more so because there's a virus going on.
Yeah. No, I like the way you put that. I described it to actually one of my clients the other day about how sometimes I describe relationships and marriages kind of like building a house on top of a foundation. And the foundation of trust and communication and respect and all that kind of stuff is going to determine how high you can build that house, right? And so like if you have like your marriage and you got kids, a job, like how high that house goes only is limited by how deep and how strong that foundation is. And to your point, both you and Lori, as you're talking about it, like if before COVID-19, like your house is kind of like on shaky ground already, and like we weren't necessarily aligned. I actually, this couple I was talking to was talking about how there was a misalignment on how they measure risk as it relates to financial investments, right? And that there have been some failed financial investments. And so the husband has a much higher level of risk tolerance. So he's much more risky. And so he's willing to just do more. And the wife is like much more conservative. And so they have a lot of issues that come out of that disparity between how they assess risk. And so because of that, their foundation was already kind of weakened because there's not enough trust that's been built up in that relationship to say, you know what, even though we don't necessarily assess the risk the same way, I trust you enough to be able to make the right call. For a lot of couples, if their trust foundation was already weak, you add COVID on top of that. Now it's even worse now, right? And so looking at it from a different angle and maybe kind of looking at it from a more macro level of not just how do we get alignment on how we're going to deal with ensuring that we're clean before we enter the house, that kind of thing. This highlights we maybe need to start talking through how do we address the foundational trust issues that we have and starting to build more trust with one another. And that gets us into a completely different area of like that's a more global problem when it comes to what couples are going through and what we do in therapy, right? A lot of what we're doing is trying to see what can we do to rebuild that trust foundation so that a couple can thrive a little bit better. The only other option that I think I see, besides simply saying that we don't have enough trust equity to kind of leverage into some of these areas, is having different conversations at different levels. And the way I'll describe this is beyond simply trying to make a decision of are you going to go out or are you not, or what is the appropriate level of risk, starting to have discussions more in the realm of what is the risk and why do you feel like it's a risk and what is the meaning behind that risk for you. I was talking with actually a friend of mine yesterday about this very issue, and he was talking to me about like I've been having this conversation with my wife, and we're getting into fights about like if I'm going out or not and helping other people, and I was like asking him like, have you asked her what she's afraid of? Like, what is it that she's really afraid of? Because instead of just talking about whether you're going to go out or not, maybe have the discussion to find out what's underneath that fear for her. And in talking about it, because I've literally had that conversation with my wife. I was like, what is it that the fear is? Is it the fear that one of us might get it? Is the objective that our family doesn't get it? Is that a realistic expectation that none of us get sick? And we're just kind of talking it through. The point that I'm trying to make here is that it requires a discussion to begin to start understanding the why before we figure out the what and the how, right? And if we understand the why, then we can empathetically connect better. I can understand a little bit better, okay, that's why my wife feels the way that she does. And if I can feel empathy and compassion for that, I might be willing to make more sacrifices because of it. I might be willing to say, okay, you know what? Because I know that's where it goes for her and I know that's how she feels about it, I will think much more responsibly about when I choose to go out or when I do these things or how I go about doing those things, right? So I think if there's a trust deficit, you still can make up for it if you really kind of double down on having empathetic and compassionate conversations between one another. I think that can move the needle a little bit as well. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add or anything to just comment on that or anything like that. So what do you guys think?
I mean, I would say if there isn't alignment, if you cannot get to a point of alignment with the people living in your home or with your spouse or with your partner, reach out and make sure you have somebody to talk to about that. Reach out and do FaceTime. Don't just text people. Don't just call people. Do FaceTime. Do something like this where you're actually seeing other people, because being able to just talk through that with someone, process it, really evaluate the risks, examine if what your fears really are valid fears. And again, get as informed as possible, because the hard thing is there's a ton of information out there, and if you spend all day listening to the news, you're going to get overwhelmed. But to read good, credible sources and to understand what the recommendations are, even when they are changing frequently, to know what's going on, so that you're basing your information and your decisions on as much information that you can that's credible, rather than just on your fears. And finding other people who can support you and say, yeah, my husband and I are having that same conversation and I'm not okay with it either, but I have to learn how to live with this new situation, because there's really nothing we can do. We can't necessarily leave our situations at this point and change things. We have to kind of just make the best of where we are. Yeah. I mean, unless you're unsafe.
Yeah. Lastly, I would say empathy, right? On both sides. the ability to recognize both point of views. And Lee, I think you touched in on it, and Laura as well, of the aspect of saying, like, you know what, I can empathize. Well, first the question is why, right? Like what about it worries you so much? And in that moment, then you can really empathize with your partner and saying, okay. And then on the flip side of like, well, why do you think that it's okay to go out and work in this point? And then to hear your partner out on that. And so it at least gives you both an idea of where the other person is coming from in a calm, not in a fighting, and it can change your posture at that point. And then you can at least have a bit of an alignment in that point. And once again, you may not agree 100%, but at least you can see where your partner is coming from and have their perspective at heart as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last thing I'll add to this as well is the ideal is that a husband and wife, a family is able to have those conversations, as you guys are talking about, to be able to dig into the why, to hear one another, to be empathetic, to be compassionate, and then to be able to make concessions and to negotiate an alignment out of that empathetic space. But this is what I tell couples sometimes who come into my office and they have like they're at an impasse and they have a difficult decision to make, and they've got to make that decision pretty soon. And what I'll tell them is that the ideal scenario is that you guys have enough communication and respect and trust with one another to be able to do that yourself. But in times of high leverage situations where you've got to make a decision, sometimes as a therapist, I'll act as the mediator, say, okay, let's figure out how to negotiate this one specific issue, so that we can get to alignment and make that decision sooner. And so essentially what I'm saying is that if you don't have the equity, you can borrow the equity by talking with a third party to try to negotiate that a little bit. And it's not the most ideal, but in a pinch, that might be something that's helpful. And so I'll just go ahead and plug that right now. If that's something that you feel like you're in a pinch to do, definitely you can reach out to one of the therapists here, talk to one of the pastors at Chase Stokes Church to kind of talk about how do I get on the same page with my spouse? Because yeah, if you don't deal with those things, it's going to continue to degrade the quality of the space that you have at home. So I'll just add that in there as well. Okay, any last thoughts or any other perspectives that we want to try to bring into this before we wrap this one up? Anyone? All right, let's go ahead and wrap this one up then. This was a good one because I think there's probably a lot of people that relate with this one, right? And I think we definitely need to come back around to that one, Laura, to just talk about how in the other situation, if you're like stuck in the same place with everyone and everyone's like they're not going out, but you still have to be around each other like 24/7. How do we deal with that kind of environment? So maybe that might be the thing that we bring up in the next podcast, but we'll see. We definitely have to come back around to that. All right, guys, thank you very much for discussing this with me. We'll pick it up next time. And definitely, again, leave a comment, reach out to us. We want to hear your questions. We want to find out what's going on. Again, we want to make this as relevant for you as possible. So be sure to kind of leave a comment and let us know how this might be affecting you and how we might be able to kind of address it on a podcast like this. Thanks very much, guys. See you later. Thanks for listening. Now, if you benefited from this podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, share with your friends, and make sure to leave us a review on iTunes. It really does help us to keep making podcasts and more content like this possible for you. If you have any questions, or want to get more content, or just want to stay connected with us, go to our website at watershedinitiative.com and follow us on social media. Lastly, if you want to get connected with a life coach or therapist, call us at our collaborative group practice, Lifeology in Richardson and Frisco, Texas at 214-556-0996.